Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Media Monday on the IBM TV network. I'm Nick Palavito. I'm your host for today, and we have a really important panel and exciting guest. And first of all, we're going to bring in from the co-author of The Millionaire Next Door and also Richer Than a Millionaire, the Honorable Bill Danko. Bill Danko, welcome to the show.
Great. Thank you.
Yes. And then we're going to move down under and bring in one of our executive producers for the IBM TV network, a former hedge fund manager. Let's bring in Shaquille Latmer. Shaquille, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Okay. And then this gentleman who recently had a book that was published that was found on, wait, I got one more person to introduce. This guy is actually the head of one of our several of our shows on the IBM TV network. He is a journalism by trade. Let's bring in Mark Lee. Mark, welcome to the show. Okay, now we got 4 people. Now we're going to add this guy. He's actually a Pulitzer Prize winner, New York Times best-selling author, and recently has a book out, which I found on Barnes & Noble, but I ordered on Amazon.com. Let's bring in the author of The Big Cheat, David K. Johnson. David, welcome to the show. I got it too, baby. I got it. You know what? I'll only tell you about having to get the book, though. I ordered on Amazon because I couldn't find it in Barnes & Noble. Then I walked into Barnes & Noble on the 30th, and poof, there it was. I was going, gosh, I didn't have to order off of Amazon. And I started reading through it, but it's like only partially through it, the book right now. I haven't gone.
Won't take you that long to finish.
Yeah, well, but the thing is, it had some good information on it. One of the best things I liked, just in the first chapter, deals with this. Okay, that Donald Trump, when he made his announcement to run for president, and this is, well, like you say, well documented, he hired a company to bring actors in to applaud for him as he ran for office. And I just found that to be hilarious.
But, as opposed to the child actors that Kamala Harris brought in.
Well,
right.
Well, the thing is, we're discussing. Oh, wait! There's one more thing. I got to tell our viewers around the world. This is a quote by Donald Trump to David K. Johnson, and they've been good buddies for the last 40 years, so they've known each other. The quote: "I know the reporter is a weird dude who's been following me for 25 years, so obviously he hasn't done so well. He's been following me in a negative fashion for 25 years, always a hit. And I'm president, so he hasn't done a very good job." That's Donald. Donald's tribute to you. And what's great about it is that you have been coined a weird dude. So the thing is,
out the website weirddude.net.
Oh, really? Do you own that website?
Yeah, I haven't done anything with it yet, but I will.
You actually own
David, you know, this man that you've been stalking for a quarter of a century, if he was still in charge of America, I may have your book already. But because of the supply chain issues under your beloved president, I don't get your book until the end of next month. See, you've missed out on the few dollars that you would have received in royalties on my Australian purchase of your book.
Is it actually going to be distributed in Australia?
Sure. I bought it from Amazon, but I don't get it until the 23rd of January.
Oh, really?
Simon & Schuster has worldwide English rights. I kept the foreign rights for the book. That is translations. You know, the first book in the trilogy, I got 11 translations, including Mongolian. And I got to say, it's the most interesting book I have because I have no idea what the symbols mean in Mongolian. One more thing, Nick. Donald didn't just pay these actors. They lied and denied about it. They didn't pay for months the bill they had. And then they finally fessed up, but they specifically denied that they paid. And that's just indicative of the grift that has been Donald his whole life and his father's life.
David, I held up a shirt on the Economics Monday show, and I did say to the audience, I'm not a partisan, as much as people think I am. And because I'm a nerd, I collect political memorabilia from all over the world. And so I do have an I'm with her shirt, but I also have a Make America Great Again shirt and hat. And I was quite interested to see that the shirt from the great man saying Make America Great Again is made in Mexico.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised you haven't put that in your book somewhere.
My MAGA hat is from Bangladesh, and then I have a second MAGA hat I gave to one of my grandsons, and it was made in Indonesia or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just Donald. It's all, there's nothing is as it appears in Donald's world, including we now know what I had said for many years had to be the case from the indictment of his company. They kept 2 sets of books.
So, but David, would you agree though? Because I know that you know a lot more about Donald Trump, because you've obviously followed him for a long time before he was obviously going into politics. Before that was a very clear thing. But would you accept that politicians on both sides of the aisle, it can be a bit shady? There's some pretty bad things that Democrats do as well. I mean, the stuff going on with Hunter Biden, the stuff that the Biden family's been involved in, it may or may not, depending on where you stand, rise to some of the stuff that Donald is accused of having done. But politicians are pretty shady characters, or their behavior leaves a lot to be desired.
Many politicians, not all of them, engage in bad behaviors. My work in the last 50 years has ended the careers of more Democrats than Republicans. We just ran.
But you were a Republican, so that would make sense. But you were a Republican, right?
Now I'm registered in a different party. I'm not a Democrat either. I'm registered in a minor party here in New York to help keep them on the ballot, because I think competition's a good thing. I mean, I don't particularly care about partisan politics. My whole career has been about quality of government, quality of business, and integrity, not politics. But the difference in Donald, as I put it in my first Trump book in this trilogy 5 years ago, is every president of the United States before Donald operated in a way that they tried to do what they thought was best with America. I mean, I can't stand the things that were done by Andrew Jackson, Donald Trump's favorite president, but he was not acting out of venality. He was acting out of belief. Chester Arthur, who was vice president, and then the president died, so he became president like a month into the term. When he came from Tammany Hall, he was utterly corrupt. And when the Tammany Hall people came down to Washington and went, "Oh, we're going to get rich now," he said, "Gentlemen, I'm the president of the United States. I have an office of trust. Leave this office and do not ever darken the White House door again." And then we got a whole bunch of reform laws from him. The only person who treated the presidency as a business opportunity, who submarined repeatedly America's national security and national interests for money, is Donald Trump. I mean, there's been nobody like him. Look, Jimmy Carter put his little tiny peanut business, he had a peanut warehouse, into a trust because of complaints that this was improper. George W. Bush put his fortune of about $15 million into a blind trust that only invested in index funds and treasuries. Obama put all his money into treasuries, and he had a much smaller fortune. I think it was about $4 million.
It's a little bit more difficult for someone like Donald Trump to put his assets there. And I would think, based on the numbers, that being the president probably hasn't been the best financial move for his existing assets, but maybe better for him if he goes into tech like he's talking about. He may make money in the future. But can I just say, though, one of the things that I think I found quite frustrating during his presidency was that a lot of the criticism of Donald Trump was about Donald Trump himself as a person. And I really view Donald Trump, and again, I'm looking at it from a distance, right? It's not my country. I don't live there. I'm not as directly affected as Americans are. The way that I looked at it was that Donald Trump was a symptom of something else. He was a symptom of the fact that people have become very frustrated with the political system. And a lot of people don't really even know the difference between Democrats and Republicans. Their parents tell them which way to vote, and they kind of stick with that for their whole lives. Most people don't really know the subtle differences on a lot of these issues that they argue about. And I think that what was happening at that time was people became very frustrated at what they see as just being government waste, government inefficiency, the division between the two political parties, the partisanship of these decisions, the rising debt levels, all that sort of stuff. And Donald Trump came in with really quite a good message. His message was, "I'm going to drain the swamp. I'm going to get rid of all the political stuff you don't like. I'm going to put America first." That's a good message. That's what. And whether or not he carried that out is a subject of debate. But it's a good way of winning a presidency.
Shaq,
and I think we need to come back to that sort of idea, maybe just not with him.
Yeah, Shaq. Let me be clear. I've discussed and written at this point, hundreds and hundreds of columns about this, plus 3 books. Donald got into office because of some factors that made it possible. Because you have to ask yourself, how can it be that a man who is a lifelong criminal, the 3rd generation head of a 4-generation white-collar crime family whose crimes go back to the 19th century, got into the White House? Well, first of all, most people don't know that because our media did a terrible job of reporting on who Donald is. Secondly, in 2019, 90% of Americans reported a smaller income than in 1973. Now, I'm adjusting here for inflation, but nonetheless, they were worse off. Their health care was fakakta by 2019. They didn't have pensions. Far fewer people had any kind of retirement savings. And for every dollar that Americans have added since 1980 in equity in their homes, they've taken on $2 of debt. That's very bad circumstances for 90% of people. So, of course, they're angry and frustrated with both parties. The second factor in Donald's rise was all of the evangelicals who went around saying Donald's a Christian. What people didn't know is one of his own books, he spends 6 pages denouncing Christians. He calls them fools, idiots, and schmucks. He expresses his clear hatred of Christianity. He has said this in speeches that were video and audio taped. And a year ago at the, almost 2 years ago now, at the National Prayer Breakfast, he said on TV that he couldn't turn the other cheek and reiterated his one-word life philosophy, revenge, which is aggressively anti-Christian. The whole message of Christianity is revenge is unacceptable. It's completely wrong. But a lot of people don't know this. And then the third element, and all of these overlap somewhat, is that Donald made blatant appeals to people who want white supremacy. He started his campaign on June 16th, 2015, saying that Mexicans were rapists and murderers. And 43 times people applauded him at that event where he claimed there were thousands of people. The room only can hold hundreds of people. And I call this in my book the original lie, or the first lie. In fact, those were the paid actors who on cue applauded his racist lines. But this suddenly awakened a lot of people in America who are not happy with the civil rights movement. And I've, long ago reported that there are millions and millions of Americans who do not want to sit next to a Latino on an airplane, do not want an Asian in the captain's seat, and by God, certainly don't want to have a black woman boss. And Donald gave these people permission to behave in terrible ways and revealed that we've actually made not nearly as much progress in civil rights as I and many other people thought we had.
So, David, I think you're conflating a few things there. Let's just go back a little bit, okay? Because there's an argument that I have with Mark Lee.
From a distance where you don't live here and haven't seen this. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. That's fine, but it doesn't mean that the issues that you bring up around race are unique to America. Okay, I've traveled a lot.
They're not.
So I think you're conflating a couple of things. The idea that somebody may not want to have a black boss or is racist against a black person is not the same thing as someone applauding that all Mexicans are rapists, which is not quite what he said in the first speech. I'm not sure what he said afterwards. That's not quite what he said, but he implied it. I'll give you that. He implied it. But look,
I don't think he said they're sending rapists and murderers. He literally said that. You can go watch the video.
Yes, he said that. That wasn't all.
And some are good people.
That wasn't all he said. But he said they're not sitting their best. Okay, and what country?
He also said that. Yes.
But what you preface that with, and this is something that the Democrats have really sort of latched onto, is that it was an appeal to white supremacists. Now, see, the problem with that is I'm ethnically Indian. Okay, I'm so many generations away from India, so I don't really know anything about India. And I'll tell you honestly, when I meet an Indian with a really strong Indian accent, I kind of sit there and go, it's too hard to understand you. I don't know. What does that mean? Does that mean I'm racist against Indians? Does it mean I'm a white supremacist? So some of the frustration that's been happening in America, and I've been all through America. I've been northern states, southern states, east and west coast. A lot of the frustration is about not being able to communicate properly or feeling like there's been jobs. This was talked about under Obama's administration. There were certain jobs where the kids had to be able to speak Spanish in order to get the job at like the local McDonald's. And so they felt as though, hey, my opportunities are being diminished here. That's not a racist thing. That's not a white supremacist thing.
Okay, so
That's people taking a position that's anti-immigration, but it's not a racist.
Jack, I'll grant your point about that, but understand that in the United States, after Trump took office, we had neo-Nazis marching and shouting slogans of Hitler Youth, blood and soil, we will not be replaced. We had the violent attacks in Charlottesville, for which the people who brought them about, the white supremacists, have been ordered now to pay $31 million. They killed Heather Heyer in that demonstration and damn near killed about 20 other people. We've had numerous incidents. And the people in many of these incidents, including the January 6th effort to overthrow the American government, many of them have said either themselves or through their lawyers, well, we were doing what Donald Trump told us to do. So to suggest,
but David, people have latched onto celebrities in the past and thought they were doing what the celebrity told them to do. The reason why I'm saying this is that America seems to be in a position at the moment, which I hope it works its way through, where you've got people that feel like they're being displaced, and a lot of this has got to do with the idea that you're going to, almost have affirmative action or things like that. So white people have always opposed that. They haven't been cool with that because they've said, well, hang on, my children are going to miss out on job opportunities. So they've become very angry. And what's happened is the political left has described them. I'm not trying to be an apologist. The political left has described them as being white supremacists. At the same time, you've got BLM activists and activists on the political left that are saying, look, we've been shut out of opportunities for a long time. We need a helping hand to get a bit more equality. And then they end up getting so frustrated that they end up turning to violence and they end up rioting. And there doesn't seem to be any middle ground. And you can't have any, because if you want to preference one race over another, you can't have any middle ground with the other group.
That is
so
not.
I think it's
not what
unfair.
the book is about. I'd like to focus.
No, I haven't read your book. I'm responding to what you're saying. But I think it's really important to remember that when Donald Trump was running for the president and Hillary Clinton was running, Hillary Clinton talked about race issues, sex, gender issues, sexuality issues. She talked about all of that stuff. Donald Trump talked about the economy. He didn't care about all the other stuff. So because that appealed to a group of people amongst the almost half of America that voted for him, amongst that group, yes, you're going to have some bad eggs, just like you're going to have some bad eggs on the other side. So I don't think it's fair to say that he appealed to the group of white supremacists and that was how he won the election, because America is inherently racist. I didn't
say that. I said,
but that's what people conclude.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't say that. This is not, by the way, what this book is about. Let me be clear. Okay. Donald Trump clearly appealed to people on racial grounds. And Hillary Clinton talked a lot about the economy, but as I pointed out, the way she did it was blah, 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 blah. And by the way, blah, 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 blah. She had actual solutions for the out-of-work coal miners. Donald Trump said, we're going to bring back coal, which of course didn't happen and couldn't happen because the market has turned against coal. And he actually worked as president against the coal miners' financial interests. So my underlying point is Donald Trump in the White House, 40 minutes after he took the oath of office, began grifting. And I show how he did this. And we have never had an administration like this in the history of the United States. We've had petty issues about money. We've there have always been relatives. Billy Carter tried to make money off his brother. Richard Nixon's brother tried to make money off his brother when he was president. Hunter Biden, clearly a very deeply troubled man, had trouble. I should point out, however, on the laptop that the Wall Street Journal, a Murdoch newspaper, had its best investigative reporters dig deeply into that laptop, and they walked away from the story. They think that there's something wrong here. They've never told us. I'm not surprised by that. What it is, we know that it's been suggested by others that the laptop may be a Russian intelligence plant because there are some things in it that are not in proper English and other oddities that don't make sense. But was Hunter Biden out, trading on daddy's position when he was vice president? Yeah, I wouldn't dispute that for a minute. Doesn't mean that Biden did anything wrong. And in Donald Trump, for the first time in our history, we had a man who was out for himself with his cabinet members, where they set out to, in their own words, as they promised, I give them credit for doing what they said. They, during the campaign, said, we're going to destroy the American government. The language used was deconstruct the administrative state. And they set out to do that.
But this is what the Democrats are wanting to do. The Democrats say we want to tear it all down and rebuild
yes, Jack, that is exactly what they said. And it wasn't well reported is an indictment of the politics reporters who don't cover government, they cover politics. But I showed in my second book in the Trump trilogy, which was an international bestseller, how things like a highly competent manager at Interior who wouldn't do what Trump wanted against the interests of Native Americans in Alaska was put into a position processing oil royalty checks because he wouldn't quit. They went to the water pollution people and told them at EPA that they were to write reports. And the reports were like this thick when they got done with them, and said, we want you to disclose to us every single weakness in enforcing the clean water laws. And then that document was taken away and it was given to the polluters. Trump was acting in direct contradiction. I show in the book how in the Middle East, Donald Trump's son-in-law, who had made this disastrous purchase of 666 Fifth Avenue in New York, paying about 3 times, at least twice and maybe 3 times what it was worth, was in danger of the whole family's economics falling apart. And he goes to the government in Qatar, where America has its most important military base in the Middle East. It's the Central Command military headquarters, or not headquarters, operational headquarters. And he tried to get them to make him a loan of $800 million to bail him out. And the Qataris looked at this and said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not stupid. And
David,
just
David,
time for
let me finish the story.
before the commercial, just real quick.
Donald Trump then turned on Qatar. He attacked Qatar. He accused them of all sorts of terrible things and took the side of the Saudis and the Emiratis, who are enemies of Qatar, against Qatar. Yes. And then
very dangerous attacks.
Where did the money come from to bail out the Kushner family? From the Saudis and the Emiratis. That is submarining American national security for personal gain.
Yes, but he wasn't the president right at that time.
And David,
yes, he was.
David,
yes, he was.
David K., before we get to the commercial, I know Nick wants to do a commercial, and I don't blame him. He's the boss and everything. But and this actually may shock Shaquille and everything, but it's nothing new. And I'm not the biggest fan of Trump, but I mean, I also know about COINTELPRO, which was definitely approved by certain presidents in terms of an attack.
But it wasn't for profit, Mark. It was for ideology. It wasn't for profit. Nobody went after the Black Panthers to make money. That's what Trump did.
Okay,
that's a big, big difference. I don't know. I mean, COINTELPRO and all. I wrote about this stuff back when it was going on in the 70s.
Right.
Before the ad, you talk about a trilogy. So I've got this book. I assume this is one of the books.
First one.
What's the second book, or is this the second book that you've got out?
This is the third book.
No,
the second book is
what's the second book?
It's even worse than you think.
Oh, that's right. I haven't been able to get it in Australia.
It was sold there. I got lots of
there was some issue. It was sold out every time I tried to get it. So if you don't write best-selling novels, then best-selling books, I might be able to buy a copy, but it kept selling out. So I'll get that one. I'll get the
you can get the ebook instantly.
And the question I was going to ask and everything, and I know we're going to go to commercial, is, and I just use COINTELPRO as one example, is haven't there been other attempts? Like I said, I'm not the biggest Trump fan, but I also have some issues with Clinton as well. And one of them is that, and I know that the right really loves this argument that I'm going to bring up, but there was a certain Treasury Secretary that, as far as I'm concerned, was probably assassinated. Because, like I said, that was Ron Brown, and it was the African-American Treasury Secretary that nobody's ever been able to fully explain what happened.
He was Commerce or Agricultural Secretary, and the plane he was on crashed into a mountain because they made the pilots, a whole bunch of people died, not just one Brown. Mm-hmm. I don't think he was assassinated. I've never seen anybody suggest that. Yeah, but the difference, Mark, is yes, there's been petty corruption in lots of, not all administrations. Nobody was indicted in the Obama administration. Nobody was indicted in the second Roosevelt administration, FDR. The most corrupt administration in the last 100 years was Reagan's, 137 indictments. Carter, there was I think one or two people.
How many in Nixon?
George W. Bush's administration, there were no significant numbers of indictments, and I don't think there was nobody under Obama, and my recollection is there was one or two people in the Clinton administration for venal acts.
And what
So
about
we never
Nixon?
had a White House.
They always made these claims that the Clintons were assassinated. They made the same claims about the Kennedys. What was that other guy? Seth Green, or it was a Democrat junior strategist who was like 24. Seth somebody or other who died, and there was a huge big conspiracy theory about that.
There was a whole conspiracy theory spread by Republicans that he had been assassinated, and it's been shown.
No. To be fair, Dave, a lot of those conspiracy theories are also pushed by Democrats. To be fair,
well, that one, the one you brought up, that one was that Hillary Clinton had him killed, and that's not what happened.
Of course not. Of course not. Look, I might disagree with some of Hillary's policies. Not all of them. I actually quite like her, and I think she'd be a good president. But, they didn't go around killing people. I mean, come on. I don't think presidents go around doing that.
Right. Yeah. I will tell you, I ask my law students at the beginning of the year every year at some point, probably the third lecture, we come up to trials for the first time. So how often do you think companies go and have a witness killed? And everybody raises their hand, and I tell them, no, that's just not how it works, bro.
No, you pay them off. With that, we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. We'll put Bill Danko on the spot since you're the co-author of The Millionaire.
David,
and Richard,
David, you talk about the indictments, but how many criminal convictions have there been? I mean, an indictment is just a charge,
right? How many criminal convictions from the Trump administration?
Yeah.
Well, Donald Trump's company itself has been indicted, not he. He was the other party in the crime for which Michael Cohen was sent to prison. And I don't understand why the Justice Department hasn't now filed against him, probably because they think that case was relatively small potatoes. But, Bill, fundamentally, you make a very good point. And one of the things I often point out to audiences is we don't even prosecute half the murders in America. At one point, there was a 10-year study done by a colleague of mine at the LA Times after I had left. And of all the murders in Los Angeles, the biggest county in America by population, about 10 million, 11 million people, only 28% resulted in a trial or a confession, one or the other. And not all of the trials ended in conviction. Most of them did, but not all of them. So we have very weak white-collar crimes in America. And the reason there are lots of white-collar criminals out there. Donald Trump is far from unique in making his money by swindling people. But we have, in Trump's case, lots of public record. Federal judge at a lengthy trial found all of Trump's testimony to have no credibility and awarded wages that he didn't pay to people who were making $4 an hour and were all hired illegally. He was fined by the New Jersey Casino Control Commission repeatedly for acts that, a couple of which I think he should have lost his casino license for. He actually cheated people at one of his casinos, and that's an astonishing thing in what was called by the state the most heavily regulated industry in America.
As in he was playing games unfairly, because I spent a lot of time at casinos.
No. The only people who were cheated would be novice roulette players, but nonetheless, he was cheating novice roulette players, and he never disputed my facts. He just said, "So what?" And he has spent his entire life doing business with not just New York mafia, but criminals all over the world. And when big developers in New York, and Donald was never a big developer. He claims to be the biggest developer in New York. He wasn't in the top 10. When the biggest developers in New York, like the Resnick family and the Lafrac family, went to the FBI and said, "You got to get these mafia people out of our pockets," Donald ran the opposite direction to the mafia people. And when the concrete strike occurred in New York, and every construction project in the city of New York, uniformly, every single one stopped, except at Trump Tower, which was where Donald's concrete was coming from a mob-owned company, A&S Concrete. And This is a man whose whole life has been a life of criminality. Well, most people who were involved in the cocaine trafficking business, they were never arrested. They were never prosecuted.
Well,
Very weak enforcement of white collar laws in America.
But David, like just on that, right? So look, I think that we need to have judicial reform. I talk about this a lot in Australia. Okay, we don't have a Bill of Rights here, so I think that some of the things that the police and the prosecutors are able to do, I think shouldn't be done, and it shouldn't be allowed. But to go back to your country in the United States, I think the United States does need judicial reform very badly. And what's more significant in the United States is that the length of the sentences. I mean, a life sentence in Australia is 25 years.
What does that have to do with my book?
No, it's got nothing to do with your book, but you're talking about white-collar crime. So I'm just talking about judicial reform.
Because the book is about white-collar crime in the White House.
Okay, well, let me finish. So one of the issues that you're going to find is that when people are convicted of more, criminal sort of acts, drug dealing or whatever, they're going to get confessions. They're going to get all those sorts of things. It's pretty hard when you've got a white-collar person because they're not going to talk to the police. They're going to lawyer up, and they're going to make the state try to prove their case. And, of course, if they lawyer up, it's going to be much, much harder. So the fact that the United States is being soft on white crime or white-collar crime, I don't think it's just because they're being soft by design. It's because the people that have money know how to work the system.
That's a great discussion for another point. I mean, we haven't touched on the things that are in my book, and I really want to do that. And I'd like to tell you one of the important stories in this book. A guy named Brian Kolfage, who's a disabled Middle East war veteran. He lost 2 limbs, I believe. Started a charity, Build the Wall. Now, building a wall to the Mexican border, which is physically impossible, but assuming you were trying to do it, Trump never did do it, would cost tens of billions of dollars. The last estimate we got from the government was $53 billion. And Brian Kolfage said, if you donate to my charity, I will not take a penny. This will go entirely to the wall. He raises about $25 million quite quickly, and DC Report, we were reporting about this. Then he gets Don Trump Jr. to go out to New Mexico with him for a fundraising event with Kimberly Guilfoyle, Don Trump Jr.'s girlfriend. And they go to this little thing that's been built along the Rio Grande River, which is just not a barrier to stop anything and actually runs a danger of creating flooding problems because it was incompetently done. They raised even more money, and Steve Bannon, Trump's advisor, at one time his campaign manager, are there. Well, Steve Bannon stole $1 million from the charity that said, we're not going to take any money from ourselves. Brian Kolfage took $350,000 cash, bought a yacht, bought jewelry, took cruises, spent a fortune of it on himself. So the Justice Department, during Trump's era, indicted these people. Donald Trump gave a pardon to Steve Bannon, his buddy, but not to the other 3 conspirators in this. They are going on trial early next year. Now, had he pardoned all 4 of them, you could say, well, he may have thought this was an overreach of justice and used his power. But no, all he did was take care of his crony, Steve Bannon. And this is consistent with what happened. Donald Trump set out from day one to turn the White House into a money machine. His son-in-law and daughter, Ivanka, made between $200 and over $600 million from their business activities while Daddy was in the White House. They got 18 sweetheart loans guaranteed by a federal agency. Now, the official story is, these are normal loans. No, they're not. They're 10-year, interest-only, no principal payment loans under terms that no commercial bank would have made because Daddy was in the White House. His Washington hotel, the primary place for people to pay tribute to him. The lease said, and there's a whole chapter about this, the lease says flatly, no federal employee may participate in this lease. And there's a long history I go through of this going back to 1808, that we do not allow members of Congress and federal appointees, and therefore the president, who's an employee, to have a contract with the federal government. And I explained, how did the bureaucrats get around this? And basically they did this. And when they were shown things, they'd say, we didn't read that, or we're not going to look at that. And the inspector general, after Trump was out of office, when they're no longer a threat to the inspector general, who can be fired by the president at any time, issued a report that just ripped these guys top to bottom. So the point of my book is America has never had a president who used the White House for his own personal financial aggrandizement. And understand, Donald Trump has made very clear, and I have said for many years, if he got into the White House, he's a wannabe dictator. Donald and I have talked about his presidential desires in the past, and he believes that he should be president forever. He said so in statements. He did them in a mocking fashion, but he put out things on the internet, on Twitter and elsewhere, that he should be president for life, and that his son, Don Jr., and Ivanka should follow him as president. He has no respect for our democracy. When a Kremlin agent announcing that they were speaking for the Kremlin asked for a meeting in Trump Tower to help the Trump campaign in 2015, Don Jr. wrote back, "Love it," and took the meeting. It is illegal for a foreign government to interfere in an American election. The opening words of the Mueller report are, "The Russian government engaged in calculated, systematic interference in the election." And the only thing a loyal American would do when getting a contact from the Kremlin in the situation Don Jr. was in is pick up the phone, call the FBI, and say, "I want to speak to someone in counterintelligence." But that's not who the Trumps are. They have no loyalty to anything but themselves. They are a family of grifters who married into a family, the Kushners, who are exactly like them, have the same values. And so I show how Donald Trump ripped off a dog charity while he was in the White House, how a charity his son Eric started to help St. Jude's for children, he turned it into a money-making operation for the Trumps. And all the way through, I show consistently they did it again and again and again. And then one of the appointees, Secretary of Transportation Elaine Chao, Mrs. Mitch McConnell, she turned the transportation department into the marketing arm of her father's shipping company. Her father owns 53 ships that move dry bulk cargo to and from China. And she wouldn't speak to any Western reporters, American reporters. There was one interview she gave, a very brief TV interview, but she courted Communist Party journalists all over the place and had the government maintaining her father's Facebook page and going to events to help her father ingratiate himself with the Communist Party in Beijing. This has just never happened. The Commerce Secretary.
Do you think that there's anything good that Donald Trump achieved for the United States?
He lied in his financial disclosure statements repeatedly. He promised to sell securities. He didn't sell them. And he had been the vice chairman of the notorious Bank of Cyprus, which is the second biggest Russian criminal money laundering bank in the world. And who was the other vice chairman of that bank? An appointee of Vladimir Putin. We had a Putin ally in the Trump administration in the cabinet. And the guy was a well-known crook. He claimed he was worth $2.7 billion. It was finally when the government threatened him, the ethics office threatened him, we finally find out he's worth $700 million. A lot of money, but not what he claimed. And he was in there doing everything he could to undermine good government and line his own pockets. And we've just never had a presidency like this.
But David, he was also an author. He was also an author, a writer. As a matter of fact, I think I read his book, The Art of the Steal, right?
The Art of the Deal.
Oh, sorry. You got
it.
My bad.
Half the royalties.
Do you think that Donald Trump did anything that was? Well, obviously you do. I know that because you're not that biased. I won't say that. Do you think anything that Donald Trump did anything that was good for the United States that had Hillary Clinton have been the president that she wouldn't have done? Do you think that he did anything better than she would have done?
First of all, I think Hillary Clinton would have been okay as a president, and her focus would have been on children. Two things: children, and doing everything she could, short of going to war, to make Putin give up Crimea, the only land taken by force since World War II in Europe. And she would have been okay as a president. I don't think she would have been a great president, but she would have certainly put a focus on children.
I thought she would have been a good one, personally.
What? I'm sorry?
I actually thought that she would have been a good one, personally.
Yeah, I mean, she would have been fine. I don't think she would have gone down as being a great president. But there are some good things Donald did in office. It's pretty hard not to do that over the course of time. There's a rule that he allowed to go forward dealing with truck drivers and the number of hours they drive. One of my sons is a big rig truck driver. So I particularly paid attention to that. But those are pretty minor things. The goal and target of the administration was, in their own words, to destroy the federal government as we know it, and secondly, to just do everything they could to make money or set themselves up for money. I mean, Jared Kushner right now is in the news. He's trying to raise billions of dollars from the Saudis and the Emiratis so he can manage it. And it isn't bias. These are facts that people widely don't know. My peers in American journalism have done a terrible job. And that's because most journalists depend on access, on sources, and there's something called talking points. I don't do any of that. I never have. I do research. And everything I ever say on this show about Donald Trump, I got a document to back it up. You know, my batting average with Donald is 1,000%, including my prediction that he wouldn't leave office peacefully. Donald's batting average was showing that I am wrong has been steady for 33 years, 0.000.
But you are a weird guy.
He says he says here you're a weird dude.
Weird guy,
Weird.
stalking the man all over the country. Now you've met Donald. You've met Donald a few times. I assume
many. No, Shaq. Many
times. Okay, so I assume that the first time that you met him, you may have had some preconceived ideas, but you didn't. You didn't come in there with sort of hostility or bias.
Jack, I've written about that.
When did you start to realize in the 30 odd years you've been? When did you start to realize that things weren't the way they were?
The first time I met Donald, it was just sort of a shake and greet and talk, and I stood around and observed. Okay. The second time, which was when we sat down for our first serious conversation, I had been told by his own executives, by state regulators, and by some big gamblers I interviewed that he didn't know anything about the casino business. And I said to every one of them, come on, the man owns 2 casinos. He later owned 4, but he owns 2 casinos. How could he possibly not know anything about the business? So with the connivance of one of his senior executives, I crafted 4 questions about the casino business and wrote them in my notebook to make sure I got them right. And when I asked the first question, which had a huge, massive falsehood in it, Donald immediately picked up my question and ran with it as if it was true. And I immediately thought, boy, this is those ads on TV.
Can we inquire what that question was?
Really love you? Well, we can tell you because we're the real psychics. And in each of the 4 questions, he accepted the premise of the question. When he was interviewed by Lester Holt, the anchor of the NBC News in America, shortly after becoming president, he accepted the premise of something that Lester Holt said, and he ran with it. That's what con artists do. And Sheikh, I've written about con artists throughout my career. In fact, I've written about the career path for them. I've written about people who were low-level people in the 20s, and by their 40s, they're running the scams. And talked to FBI agents about the career ladder for con artists. And Donald is a grifter and a con artist. And I've shown this over and over and over again, that he cheated investors, he lied to workers, he lied to vendors. It's who he is. He does not have any of the moral constraints most of us have. He doesn't see anything wrong with stealing.
Don't I call these people sociopaths, David?
Yes, Donald is a sociopath, not a psychopath.
Right.
That's different.
Not a psychopath, right?
He's
sociopath.
I will point out, Nick, that most of the activity that David K. Johnson is referring to is what he did when he was a Democrat. No, come on, I'm being.
But he used to be a Democrat.
What were the questions? What was the first question that you actually asked him?
It was the first question. I tried to find the notebook, and an old cat we had.
Because I know a few things about casino. I'm just curious what the question was.
The first question I asked him was about the game of craps. Mm-hmm. And it was very carefully worded, and I was very precise about emphasizing the words that would be a signal to anybody who knew anything about the game of craps that I was full of it. And he just ran with the thing. And I've done that with him many times.
But in fairness, I spent a lot of time in casinos. I'm one of the highest. I am the highest level of membership you can get in Australia. But if you ask me, a question about pay-gow or even craps really, because I don't play it very often, I'm probably not going to know the answer of the intricacies of the game. You ask me a question about baccarat.
Jack, here's what you're missing. 2 things. First of all, Steve Wynn would have answered that question perfectly. But secondly, it was his own executives who told me this. And my first book, which is about half about Trump, Temples of Chance, about the casino industry, opens with a story of how Donald Trump had the biggest gambler in the world, Akio Kashiwagi, at the table in Atlantic City. He's betting at the rate of $14 million an hour. I'm sitting there watching this, $14 million an hour. And he should
What was
have
his average bet size?
$70,000.
70. Well, that's not that high.
70, maybe it was 140. It's in the book, but it was 70.
That's not that high these days.
This is 1989, pal, a long time ago.
Yeah.
And at the time, Akio Kashiwagi was considered in the gaming publications the biggest gambler in the world. And I'm the only person who ever watched him as a journalist gamble. And Donald had a deal, a double or nothing deal with him. He should have won $24 million. Instead, he lost $6 million because he interfered in the game. And that's the opening story I tell to show he doesn't know what he's doing. In the business side of his casinos, while the competitors were investing in customer service software, they would, when mattresses wore out, they would upgrade rooms. They'd replace paint with wallpaper. They put in nicer furniture. Not Donald Trump. I stayed in his hotel just before it finally closed, and the same stuff was there. The mattress was lumpy. I got a suite. The mattress was lumpy. There were patches where people had broken the built-in furniture, and they had fixed it with plastic wood, that stuff you can buy at the hardware store. He never reinvested in his businesses. He was a terrible businessman. And it was his own executives who put me onto this stuff. And again and again and again, they would show me and provide me with evidence of his unbelievable incompetence in the business. The other questions I asked were about much simpler things than the one I hit him with first, the craps one. But in all 4 cases, he assumed I had said the truth and then ran with it like he was an expert. Here, one other thing to keep in mind about Donald. I'm a world-recognized authority on tax policy. I've lectured on every continent except Antarctica because there's no place to lecture there. And Donald Trump claims to be the world's greatest expert on 22 subjects, one of which is tax policy. He said no one in the history of the world knows more about taxes than Donald Trump. When he was put under oath, he was asked, well, how much do you know about accounting? I don't know anything about accounting. You don't know anything about accounting? Nothing. Well, you sure about that? Yeah, I don't know anything about accounting. You can't know anything about taxes if you don't know accounting.
So David, when you asked him the question, I'll just ask you 2 things here. One, when you asked him the question about craps, would you have had more respect for him if he said to you, you know what, that's one of the games I don't know that well?
Yeah.
Would you have preferred that? And the second question I'll ask you, probably the more important one, when it comes to his executives, I assume not all of them, came and spoke to you. Did you get the feeling then that the ones that were talking to you were feeling that they had tried to tell Donald this and he didn't listen, or were they just dissatisfied with their positions?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Let me tell you that the executives who were the most helpful to me all went on to wonderful careers at other casino companies. And
right.
the only people who I didn't find particularly helpful were people like he appointed to run one of the casinos, a guy who was literally a falling down drunk. I had to catch him in my arms one time on the casino floor. He was so drunk, okay? The competent people were just appalled because he kept interfering in their business. He would interfere in what they were doing. There were all sorts of other side shenanigans going on with his mistress and his wife. And I mean, the guy is not a competent businessman. He's a highly competent con artist. He's the greatest con artist in the history of the world. And by the way, when I first interviewed him, the issue wasn't respect. The issue was, what does this guy know? So a few years later, Donald and I were having lunch, one of the many, many times we were together, and I tried to give him some really simple tax advice, showing him how he had some excess tax benefits that he could sell and do it legally under the rules of the Casino Control Commission. He couldn't follow the advice, even though he's the greatest expert in the history of the world. And it was really simple advice, Shaq, really simple. And we were going through his biggest deal to that point, the Taj Mahal casino.
Right.
And I could see him sitting there with his, super cooked steak, just charbroiled, black steak, getting more and more upset as I'm going through the deal. And finally, he just explodes. He says, "How do you know that?" I said, "How do I know what?" He said, "How do you know all this about my deal?" I said, "Well, Donald, you had to put all this stuff in the public record. I just studied it." He had no idea what was in his deal. He didn't have a clue. And later that day, or now it was another day, he and I are walking down the boardwalk together. And I said, by the way, Donald, how much are you worth? He goes, $3 billion. And I said, I don't believe you. He stops, he turns to me and he says, I'm going to call your editor. And I said, do you want his direct dial number? And either I said or he said, why don't you believe me? And I said, Donald, I'm a newspaper reporter. I have 8 children. I can pay all my bills on time. You say you're worth $3 billion. I've been interviewing scores, it turned out there were hundreds, of vendors you haven't paid. We don't know anything about business. And I said, come on, Donald, you know, and I know that I know a great deal about business. If you were a billionaire, you could borrow against an asset, you could sell an asset, you could do a lot of things. It might hurt. It might be very expensive. You might pay a high interest rate for a loan, but you could get the money to pay these people you're not paying. Well, later that day,
that's something I think was.
You got to hear the end of the story, Shaq. You got to hear the end of the story. That day, he took his helicopter back to New York, and he was on TV. And what did he tell the TV reporter? He was worth $5 billion. He just makes this stuff up. He's a criminal. He's just
Hillary talked about this in relation to vendors not being paid. And look, I can tell you, not anywhere near his scale. I've had a few failures in my early 20s. I bought a few businesses and, kind of screwed up. And I was in my 20s, people were expecting that. But the one thing I will say is I always made sure that I eventually paid everybody who I was owed. And I think that was something that really I was concerned about. I don't think that anybody, especially in his position, should ever leave a local contractor not able to pay their staff, not able to pay off their mortgage, things like that. It was unethical.
I would really like, in a little bit of time we got left, to hear what either Mark or Bill wants to know about.
Well, I had a couple of questions for you. One is, if I'm remembering correctly, I think that Mr. Trump, at one point or another, President Trump said that he was a fan of P.T. Barnum. And if I remember correctly, I think I read a review or something along those lines. I'm not 100% sure of that, but if you've heard anything along those lines, I'd love to know whether that's confirmed.
30 years ago, I said that Donald is P.T. Barnum, and he embraced that. There are a number of lines he uses that came from me, and he embraced. And that's one of them. I will tell you, I've been criticized by people who point out that P.T. Barnum never hurt anybody. And for the people in his shows, people with conjoined bodies and women with, hairy faces, that he actually was kind to them and helped them in many ways. And that's a legitimate criticism. But P.T. Barnum's basic shtick was, here, come see the Fiji mermaid. And of course, no grown-up was taken. Well, maybe some idiot grown-ups, but basically this was to take in children, not grown-ups, to see things like the Fiji mermaid.
Who do you think that's what the other question I was going to ask is, who do you think is if Donald is the worst president we've ever had, who is the second worst one? I'm guessing it would probably be Nixon, but I don't know that. So who do you think is the second worst one if we're going to agree that he was the worst?
I don't agree that he was the worst.
In my head, it was the guy immediately before Lincoln. And I think historians have generally called him the worst. Nixon, keep in mind that Richard Nixon did a lot of good things. He signed the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. He got us to have relations with China. He supported fundamental welfare reform. He agreed to universal health care. And then George Meany, the head of the AFL-CIO, said, well, we can get an even better deal if we wait a year. And so we didn't get it. And of course, then Watergate erupted and we never did get it. So, I mean, Nixon was personally paranoid, and it destroyed his presidency. But he wasn't out making money off his presidency.
Yeah, but all due respects, though, David, wouldn't he be reelected if it wasn't COVID-19? In other words, and I did a poll recently on LinkedIn again. Here's the poll came down. 27% for Trump, 8% for Biden, 60-some% for anyone else.
Yeah.
Okay. In other words, but Trump still has more popularity than Joe Biden.
I don't think that 67% would agree if it was Kamala Harris, because her ratings.
No, they just said somebody else other than I put Trump. Biden,
Nick, I think had Donald Trump properly handled COVID, he might have gotten a second term. And remember, he told us when there were 15 cases, it's going to be 0 in a few days. While he was telling Bob Woodward, oh, yeah, I know, lots of people are going to die. He was going against the science. And at DC Report, we run something called the Trump.
There wasn't any science at that time, Dave, when he first started making those comments.
Let me finish, Jack. I'll tell you that why you're wrong. At the time the COVID began, the same day in the U.S. as in South Korea. South Korea and a number of other countries followed the best science, and this is not new. How to deal with pathogens like this, we have science on going back hundreds of years. And South Korea, if we'd followed the South Korea model, and that is a country 14 times more densely populated than we are, instead of 775,000 dead Americans, we'd have about 21,000. And Donald's, attacking science, suggesting crazy ideas like we're going to put lights inside you or inject bleach and other crazy things. That costs lots of lives. And absolutely, I think that the COVID guaranteed he wouldn't get a second term. But hey, let's recognize something. He got 74 million votes. That's 11 million more than he got the first time around. Joe Biden got 81 million votes, 7 million more than that. But there's no question. There are a lot of Americans. I mean, I've interviewed Americans and been on shows with them who will happily give up democracy and have Donald Trump be their dictator. I mean, I'm stunned by it, but I've been on shows with people.
That's not
okay. If Donald's our dictator, he'd be the best.
How can you be a free market?
You didn't get a gun in your face.
I asked you this when you said this, 12 months ago. How can you be a free market capitalist dictator? Is that a thing now? Come on, David.
Sure, you can be. No. Hold
on.
Like,
I'm going to dictate and demand that you have your freedom by government.
Capitalism has nothing to do with the Constitution. There's no mention of business or corporations in the Constitution. Go read it. It is a political
I've read the Constitution. Thank you very much.
Political system.
Read it again.
You absolutely can have a market system in which you have a dictator. There's no incompatibility between that. None at all.
Well, you have amendments which set out how many presidential terms the president can be there.
Sure, but we're
right. You have three branches of government to make sure that a president that is there does not encroach on existing laws. You've got the judicial branch.
If Donald gets back into office, that won't matter. He'll shred the Constitution. He has no regard or respect for it. He has no idea what's in it. He has said national TV national TV as president, I have the right to do anything as president. That's not.
Richard Nixon said that too. But I think he did.
No, what Nixon said was if the president does it, it's not a crime. That's different.
Well, similar. But what you're doing by saying that is that he'll shred the Constitution. I think devalues the strength of the three branches of government and the checks and balances that your governmental system has.
Yes, and exactly. And the last chapter of the book is about how Trump has revealed that we've run our government on trust, on the belief that the president would act on behalf of the country, what he believed to be in the interests of the country. And now we know we can elect a president who doesn't operate that way. He acts on behalf of what's best for him, his family, and his cronies.
But Congress has the right to impeach him. The judicial branch has the right to.
And then they did it twice.
Yeah, they did it twice, and it
didn't work. But he's
they did it. The House of Reps did it.
It didn't matter.
He's
Teflon.
Okay,
no effect at all.
Teflon, nothing sticks. Nothing sticks. But what does stick here is the big cheat. It's out on the bookstores today. David K. Johnson. Make sure that you buy it and read it, except in Australia where it's not available.
It'll be available from the end of next month.
Okay, you're going to have to wait for that, and we'll see you next time on.
Don't forget Bill's belt too.
And Bill, yes, Bill is out too. Thank you. Bye-bye.